is not really just a red liquid. It is made of several things. It's actually a mixture of several different things. Okay? It's mostly water, which we call plasma, and then various types of cells and cell parts. So we're going to talk about each of the 4 main components of blood and talk about what they do. So the plasma is the liquid portion. It's about 55% of the blood. Okay, so most of your blood is actually this liquid, this plasma.
So why is it called water? A liquid.
And this plasma is important. Obviously, it transports all the other parts. They're kind of suspended in the plasma. So as the plasma flows through your arteries and veins and capillaries, it carries all the other parts with it. Shane?
Is it possible for like your body just to leave plasma? Like,
A little bit. I think it could, yeah. Yeah. Yep. And the plasma is where nutrients are dissolved. Things like glucose, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, those substances are dissolved in the plasma. So the plasma is important for transporting those things around. So there's the plasma. Then we have some other parts. One part are the red blood cells. Red blood cells are important. Their shape is pretty distinctive. They're these sort of flattened discs. They look like frisbee or something, or like a donut, but it doesn't have a hole in the middle. They're just sort of concave. And these red blood cells, what's their main job?
Keep us healthy.
No. What do red blood cells do? What? No, they are part of our blood.
Keep us at a normal skin level. Like no.
give oxygen to muscle.
They carry oxygen. Their main job is to carry oxygen to your cells. So the oxygen isn't dissolved in the plasma. The oxygen actually binds to a molecule in the red blood cell. So those red blood cells are what carries oxygen from your lungs to the rest of your body. The type of molecule that actually binds the oxygen is called hemoglobin. And we talked about oh no, you guys didn't do the trick. Hemoglobin is a protein that contains iron. And this is why it's important to have a source of iron in your diet, because if you don't eat enough iron, you don't produce enough hemoglobin, and your blood cells don't carry enough oxygen. That leads to anemia, which is being tired, fatigued all the time, very low energy. Because, makes sense, if your cells aren't carrying enough oxygen, they're not supplying the rest of your cells with the oxygen they need to produce ATP, to produce energy for your body to function. Okay, there's another type of blood cell, white blood cells as well.
Those healthy.
Does anybody know what a white blood cell does, Abby?
It protects your body from disease.
Yeah, they're part of your immune system. They are your body's defense. They fight off and destroy pathogens, bacteria, viruses, organisms that could cause a disease. White blood cells destroy them. You actually have many types of white blood cells. There's memory cells, B cells, T cells, antibodies, all sorts of different parts of your immune system that gets pretty complex. We're not going to get into that. But normally, if you're healthy, you have a certain number of white blood cells, many fewer white blood cells than red blood cells. But when you do get sick, when you have an infection, the number of white blood cells increases drastically. Your body produces more white blood cells to deal with that infection until you feel healthy again. Sebastian?
If you trip or something and you start bleeding, you cut yourself and you start bleeding, would that need white blood cells? Would that be?
Yes. Let's talk about that in 1 second after we talk about platelets. The third part of your blood are the platelets. These are cell fragments and fibers which are responsible for forming blood clots. So you know, people always say, well, that doesn't sound very good. So when are blood clots good? Yeah?
Like you're bleeding out your skin.
Yeah.
Like a skin.
Yeah, if you're bleeding, if you get a cut, you stop bleeding because these platelets, once they're exposed to the air, they start clumping together. And they basically form sort of this network over the damage to your blood vessels and seal it off. And they build up, and that's why you stop bleeding, because these platelets clump together, sealing off the injury, the site of the injury. So that's good. Blood clots can be bad if they form internally, inside of arteries, where they shouldn't form. They can move through the circulatory system, they can get lodged somewhere and block the flow of blood. But that's not a normal response. Normally, they don't clump together and clot until there's some injury. Couple things. There are people that are born where their platelets don't work properly. It's a disease called hemophilia. And when they get a cut, they bleed excessively. It takes a long time for them to stop bleeding. If they bump into things, they get bruises very easily because a bruise is bleeding underneath the skin. So their blood doesn't clot as well. And you mentioned if you were playing lacrosse on the turf and you slid across the turf, you got a big turf burn. Okay?
Oh.
So you start bleeding, and what happens though? You stop because these platelets eventually clog up, and then what are you left with?
Like
A scab, yeah. That is a mixture of platelets, okay, that clog to stop you from bleeding, as well as red blood cells that are trapped inside of those platelets, and white blood cells as well, okay, that help destroy the bacteria that may have been getting into your injury. Now, if you ever had a cut and it got infected, what happens there?
Something unknown gets into your blood before the platelets can seal off the wound.
Yeah, that there's some kind of bacteria usually that got into that wound, and your body deals with it by producing lots of white blood cells to destroy that bacteria. What do we call those white blood cells and bacteria? What's that? Pus? Pus is a mixture of white blood cells that have destroyed those bacteria and the bacteria that they destroyed, and that's a response to having an infection. That's what pus is. Real quick story about pus.
Okay, great.
When I was like 11 years old,
Why are you talking
No,
about
you have to start with Once Upon a Time.
when I was 11 years old, I had appendicitis. I think I told you guys this before.
No, you
No.
didn't.
You don't
So-
tell us anything.
I got sick when I was 11 or 12 years old, and I was throwing up over and over again, 38 times in one day. So my parents brought me to the doctor,
Is that even normal?
and no, it's not normal. I had appendicitis. So
What's
my
that?
appendix, so your appendix is a little
Yeah.
extension of your large intestine. Looks like a little worm. And sometimes when people gets infected with bacteria and starts swelling up, the bacteria reproduce. If it bursts, it spills bacteria into your abdomen, and you can die from it.
My
It's
mom
make you very
burst.
sick. So anyway, if you get appendicitis, they have to remove your appendix, basically. So back then, they would remove your appendix by making an incision in your lower right abdomen. They take out your appendix, and then they sew you back up, and you have an incision, and you get better. So I had my appendix out, I felt better. I was in the hospital a couple days, came home, and the next day I was resting, and I was just in my pajamas. I can still remember I was at the kitchen counter, I was eating cereal, and all of a sudden I smelled something really bad. I'm like, was the milk bad? And I'm looking around for something. It smelled awful, and it was just the stench. And I didn't know what it was until I lifted up my shirt, and I was just covered in pus. My incision had gotten infected and basically burst open, spilling pus all over, and it has this horrible stench of dead bacteria cells and white blood cells. So they bring me back to the hospital. They reopened my incision, cleaned it out, sewed me back up again, gave me antibiotics, and then I was okay.
That hurt.
Yeah, it hurt because they didn't give me any ASC or something. They just had to because it had partially healed together, so they just had to put the forceps in there and stretch it open and tear it back open again. Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
did they put you on
Because it was they had to do it pretty quickly.
Isn't that what happened to Harry Houdini?
I don't know. Did he get an infection and die from it?
No.
He had appendicitis?
His appendix.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Matt?
What do you mean by back then they cut
Now they do appendix surgery laparoscopically using, we'll talk about laparoscopic surgery maybe today or Monday. But anyway, they just use puncture holes where they put the tools in, do their surgery, and then you only have a tiny little circular incision instead of like a cut through your muscle, through your skin. They just do it a little differently. All right.
Yeah.
When we look at blood, if you take a sample of blood, which obviously is a red liquid, and centrifuge it. Centrifuge is a machine where you take a test tube of blood like this, you put it in this centrifuge machine, and spins it around very, very quickly. And the parts of the blood separate from each other according to density. And so this is an example of centrifuge blood, where you have the bottom are the actual, just the red blood cells.
Is that real blood?
No.
Oh.
And then the top section is the plasma. The plasma is a yellowish kind of liquid. The blood cells are on the bottom. The other parts, like the platelets and white blood cells, are very, very small percentage of your blood. You don't even see them in this sample. These ones are meant to show a person with normal cholesterol in their blood and a person with high cholesterol. Can you guess which is a person with high cholesterol?
That one.
The one
Yes.
with
That's
The cloudier one,
Yeah.
because that cholesterol is what's making that cloudy versus the clearer plasma of a person with normal cholesterol. All right.
Do you have any more stories? Because Mr. Raymond's story is pretty cool.
No. All right. Blood vessels. We have over 60,000 miles of blood vessels in our bodies. Okay?
pretty crazy.
Almost all of that is in the form of capillaries. Arteries and veins make up a very small portion. It's the capillaries that make up so much of that distance, because basically every cell in our body is surrounded by a capillary, this network. So arteries, as we talked about earlier, they carry the blood away from the heart. Arteries have to be very strong. They're muscular. They're elastic, because they have to withstand the pressure of your heart forcing blood into them. Almost all arteries carry oxygenated blood. The only exception is the pulmonary artery. Because where is the pulmonary artery sending its blood?
To the
To the lungs. So that blood is low in oxygen. But everywhere else, the arteries are carrying oxygenated blood. Arteries are elastic and strong. Okay? And arteries, they leave the heart pretty big. The biggest, the aorta, is maybe about the size of your thumb around. But as they move through your body, they start branching off. And each time they branch off, they get smaller and smaller. Eventually, they get so small, they form capillaries. Capillaries are the smallest blood vessels. Okay? They're very, very thin. In fact, the walls of a capillary are just a single cell thick. And they're very thin, so that material can diffuse in and out of them. You remember when I showed you the diagram, the picture of the alveoli in the lungs?
Yeah.
And they were each covered in like that network of blood vessels? Those were the capillaries. So that's an area where oxygen can go through the wall of the capillary into the blood cells, and vice versa. So things can diffuse in and out through capillaries. They're so small, red blood cells only can go through single file. They're very, very narrow. And as they go through the capillary single file, material diffuses in and out of the blood. Nutrients, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and so forth. All right. After blood goes to the capillaries, so the arteries got smaller and smaller and smaller, they branched off and they formed capillaries. What happens when the blood gets through the capillary, you think?
To go into a
Yeah, they start merging together, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they form veins, which eventually lead where?
To the heart.
Back to the heart.
Woo.
Okay? So veins bring blood back to the heart. Most veins carry what type of blood? Except for
Pulmonary.
the pulmonary vein, because it's coming from lungs going to the heart, so it's obviously going to be carrying oxygenated blood. Now veins don't have to withstand a lot of pressure because by the time blood gets through the arteries and capillaries, the pressure is fairly low. But so in order to prevent the blood from flowing backwards in the wrong direction, veins have these valves in them, these one-way doors that allow blood only to go in one single direction. So veins are much thinner. On your body, the veins are usually closer to the surface. You see, like in your hands and stuff, those are veins. Arteries are usually deeper within your body because damage to an artery is a major problem. Okay? If you watch like in a movie and somebody gets cut and blood is spurting out, that's an artery because every time your heart beats, forces blood into the arteries. When you feel your pulse in your neck, what you're touching is that main artery bringing blood to your brain. You feel it every time your heart beats, it forces blood into that artery and it expands. So by feeling your pulse, you're feeling that artery expand each time blood is forced into it, and that indicates your heart rate. If you put your two fingers on the left side, put your right hand, two fingers left side of your neck, slide towards your throat, but before you get there, there's an indentation. In here, if you stick your fingers, not too hard in there, but in that little dent,
Yeah, I feel it.
that's your artery back in there. Before you get to your trachea and your larynx, it's over there. All right. So when we look at the arteries and veins, they obviously mirror each other in terms of their placement because wherever blood gets taken to, it needs to come back to the heart. So you see arteries and veins there, and in between the two are the capillaries. So arteries turn into capillaries, which turn into veins.
Capillary network.
This is what's called a capillary network. This diagram, probably almost the exact same diagram, will be on your quiz on Tuesday. So you need to be able to label all 9 of these things. If you use that gray matter between your ears, it shouldn't actually be as difficult as it may look. So if we think blood is flowing in this direction, so it goes this way, from left to right. What blood vessel, raise your hand please, what blood vessel is on this side? Maya. It's an artery. This whole thing in the middle is the capillary. Raise your hand if you could tell me what type of blood vessel. It's number 2, Laura.
Vein.
That's a vein. So arteries turn into capillaries, which turn into veins. Okay, number 4 is pointing to one of these little circles. What do those circles represent, Matt? Those are red blood cells. Oh, forgot about that. The body cells are these blobs. They could be liver cells, they could be skin cells, or cells in your intestine or your calf muscle. Doesn't really matter. But every cell in your body is basically surrounded by a capillary. Wherever you have cells, there's capillaries surrounding them to provide them with oxygen and nutrients. All right, now, so then what's this empty space here? Is it just like air?
No.
What do you think it is?
Vacuole.
Yeah?
Cytoplasm?
Not quite, because cytoplasm's in the cell. This is like not quite in the cell, but surrounding all of the cells. Close, it's basically plasma that's out of the blood. Once plasma leaves the blood, we call it something else. It has a whole system dedicated to it. Antonio? No?
Neurons?
No?
Endocrine?
Noreen? Yes, that is lymph, body fluid that surrounds all of our cells. The lymphatic system. Brings it back. Okay, now, when we look at these arrows, we're looking at a substance that's moving. So think for a minute. What is a substance that moves? It's going in number 7. Oh no, not this is a substance. Yeah. Number 7. What is this empty space between the blood cells?
Number 6.
Plasma.
Oh, you do 6. Yeah, all right, 6. What is this arrow? Something moving from a red blood cell into a body cell. What substance would that be?
Oxygen.
Yes. Raise your hand.
Sorry.
Number 7. These red blood cells are not just moving through the air. What surrounds them, Donovan?
Plasma.
Yes. Number 8 is showing a substance that's moving from the plasma into a body cell. What would that be? From plasma into body cell. Donovan?
Nutrients.
It's nutrients. It's glucose, amino acids, vitamins, minerals. They are carried in the plasma and they go to the body cell.
What was the last one?
And last, number 9, what is a substance that be going from a body cell into the blood? Antonio?
CO2.
Yes, carbon dioxide.
I was gonna say race.
All right, skip. Skip.
Okay.
All right, these are some pictures. Anyone been to the Bodies exhibition? They have one in New York City, Times
I
Square.
have
What's it like, Emily?
discussed.
It's disgusting. What is it?
I don't remember. I was like in second grade.
They're all, anyone else on there?
I just
Do they-
Preserved bodies of people,
Wait, really?
Yeah.
but they've been treated in different ways. These are, what they did is they took a person's body,
They cut their hands off.
they injected latex into the capillaries and then dissolved the rest of the body.
That is
So what you see, these are only capillaries. All the other body tissue is gone. But you can obviously see, okay,
That is actually really cool.
you can actually see all those. These are obviously arteries, but the very, very fine stuff, those are veins.
Oh.
Veins are-
I mean, those are capillaries, I'm sorry.
Oh.
These are all the
Makes me think
arteries of the body.
like this.